Happy Friday, parish orphans and retrogrades. Today marks a momentous day for both Catholics and Americans, and especially for Catholic Americans. Our president, Joe Biden, is currently, actually it just ended, it was an hour-long meeting with Pope Francis. And lots of hijinks happened within the last 24 hours in regard to this meeting. So it's momentous, and I'm going to tell you why. The press had virtually no access, aside from a very small press team, parish orphans and retrogrades, that essentially just photographed Biden and Jill Biden getting out of the presidential limo. There's no other information to be had. I'll explain what this means momentarily. It means something really distinct. I'm going to tell you why. In this case, the medium is the message, and we're going to get right to that in a second. I wanted to kick a shout out to this channel's glorious patrons on Patreon. That's the best way to support this show, is to become a patron of the show. And we're going to be upping the ante of our patron benefits in 2022. The newest goodie for patrons is the $20 tier called St. Luke's Singles Society, where Catholic retrogrades can meet and mingle. Go to St. Luke's Singles Society on Patreon. And in general, I just want to thank from the bottom of my heart the patrons of the Rules for Retrogrades channel. You guys make doing what I do possible. So thanks. Also, get your copy of The Case for Patriarchy today. If you don't already have one, go get it. If you do have one, please go to Amazon.com and leave a review of whatever chapter or chapters you've read in the book. Leave an honest one. But I'm confident that will be a strong review, a laudatory review, if you've read one or more pages of this book. So do that on Amazon.com. And if you don't have it, go get the book. That's the most easy and perhaps indirect way to support this channel, to buy the books that we slang here on Rules for Retrogrades. Finally, I have long been endorsing realestateforlife.org. Go to realestateforlife.org. If you want to get from a blue state to a red state, or if you need to get from a blue state to a red state, if you're a conservative or a religious person, a Christian of any stripe, then the imperative is now, and the imperative is affirmative. Get from the bluest of the blue to the reddest of the red. Like I did, I went from California to Mississippi. This is a hassle, a headache. The good folks at realestateforlife.org will make it less of a hassle and less of a headache. We're in a kind of lull in the Biden presidency after the first year, the opening salvo of this administration. This is the time to make a move before the state governors, vis-a-vis the beer bug, start shutting down borders or doing drastic things like shutting down borders. This is your time to get to a red state like Mississippi or Alabama, Texas, Florida. Any place in the southeastern part of this country is what I recommend. Do so today, realestateforlife.org. Yesterday, parish orphans and retrogrades, late in the day, it was announced by Biden's press team that there would be essentially no press of the event as it happened. The meeting between a sitting U.S. president who is Catholic and Pontifex Maximus, Pope Francis. This is a big deal. Anytime the Pope meets a president, it's a big deal. But this is only the second time in U.S. history that a U.S. president who is Catholic traveled overseas to visit the Pope at the Vatican. And what did they do? By they, I'm not referring to any particular party. We have word. I was on with Eagle Eye Ed Martin earlier on RT News. We have some indication that this came from Biden, not Pope Francis, but presumably it was an understanding. So why did they do this? What message are Biden and Francis together sending the world? By meeting openly in a clandestine way, in an openly clandestine way. We call this hiding in plain sight. And I will tell you this here today. No one else is seeing it. No one else is saying it. I think they're missing the angle here. The medium is the message. For a U.S. president who is Catholic to meet the Pope, one who's openly pro-abortion and openly antipathetic to the most important of the Catholic social teachings, to meet with the president, and it's going to be a friendly meeting. These are two of, by my count for my money, 5 of the most important and powerful men in the world. And they're meeting under a certain auspicious understanding. That understanding is Francis is a man of the left, Biden's a man of the left, they're friends. Okay? So together, these friends want to send a message to the world, and the message goes like this. We don't have to show you what we're meeting about. We're not going to show you what we're meeting about. You all, parish orphans and retrogrades out there, you can guess as to what the meeting is about. And but I guarantee you this is a power move, okay? The medium is the message. There are a number of ways I know this, but except what's important is that they know that you Catholic Americans out there well understand at least a couple of the line items for conversation in this meeting. And I'll talk about the most important of those line items in just a second. We know what it's about, right? The USCCB meeting awaits just 2.5 weeks away. In 2.5 weeks from now, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops meets in Baltimore, Maryland, and they have had it tabled and set aside to discuss Canon 915. Okay, so before we get into the analysis of Canon 915, and particularly Cardinal Burke's analysis of Canon 915, he published an amazing piece that I'm going to share with you some. I just want to remind you that the medium is the message. They're clearly sending the message to you and to me that they know that you know the things they're supposed to talk about. Remember when Speaker Pelosi visited the White House a month and a half ago? The picture being released by the Vatican was of the Pope and the Speaker having a grand old time, laughing it up. The medium is the message. It doesn't matter what they talked about. The picture is the message that they're friends. So, and like George Costanza tells Jerry Seinfeld, it's all about signals. And signals between and amongst human beings are very basic, particularly when it comes to tribalism. Globalists good, anti-globalists bad. I hate, I'm not reducing this all to some sort of conspiracy theory. I'm just letting you know. Pope Francis is signaling you, the Catholic American, who he doesn't like. Remember Antonio Spadaro? I traded barbs with this guy on Twitter as few as 4 summers ago. Spadaro's kind of been taken off his pedestal some, but he used to be the Pope's main right-hand man. And the thing he would consistently say is, the Pope does not like conservative Americans. The Pope does not like the so-called ecumenism of hatred between right-wing American Protestants and right-wing American Catholics like yours truly and mine truly, which is my audience, you. He does not like us. Spadaro made this crystal clear 4 summers ago and you know, a couple of years before that when Spadaro was kind of on his high horse as the main mouthpiece, unofficial mouthpiece of the Pope. So this has been crystal clear for some time. And the point is just that Pelosi, Biden are friends. Now, it doesn't mean Pope Francis understands our politics. It doesn't mean he understands Anglo-American culture. He doesn't. He is an expatriated Italian South American. Much misunderstanding of our culture, politics, and political economy. There you have it. It's that simple. So by saying, hey, I align myself as simpatici with Pelosi or Biden, it's just kind of an overarching watchword. The Pope is not saying, hey, I know exactly what their politics are about. I know exactly how the House of Representatives works, how a bill becomes a law. what a line item veto is, what Article 1, Section 8 of your Constitution is, what President Biden's Article 2 power violations are alleged against him by American conservatives. That's not what he's saying. None of that. It's not that specific. There's only a few people that care about those things anyway, right? Real politicos and political philosophy professors. He's speaking to the masses, the hoi polloi out there, left and right. There's hoi polloi on both sides. And he's sending a message. Pelosi good, Biden good, they're friends, they're trusted, we'll meet behind the scenes. The most you'll get is a glimpse of us scratching each other's back, right? Making each other laugh. That is the opposite of the message that Pope Francis sent day in and day out vis-a-vis President Trump, right? Do you get it? It's that simple. So the medium is the message. They're going to turn off cameras. Yes, there's this other pragmatic reason being Biden's incompetency. The fact that whatever, he might have any number of debilitating ailments that are simply embarrassing for those who are sympathetic to the left side of the aisle politically in America. Yes, I get it. But this was, I think, a corroborated silence, a conspiracy of silence, letting everyone guess. And we do guess rightly. So let's move into the one thing they will for certain discuss. There are a couple obvious points of review. But the one thing they will certainly discuss will be Canon 915. Now, it might not be a substantive discussion the way you're thinking. Pope Francis is not approaching President Biden in any discussion, behind the scenes or in front of the world, before or behind the curtain. Now that the curtain's drawn, it's all behind the curtain. It wouldn't change, right? It's not going to be a substantive discussion the way it would be with, say, a disinterested pope that simply views his office as making incumbent upon him the duty to clearly articulate to friend or foe the Catholic social teaching, particularly in these most grave areas like abortion. Now, as you know, I'm not trying to insult the parish orphan or the retrogrades intelligence. Biden is, after essentially 5 decades, in the limelight as one of these so-called half-half abortion guys. Personally, I'm against it, but professionally, I'm not. He's come out, and that really is to be pro-abortion anyway, pro-death culture. That is what it is. But he's come out more aggressively over the last year in the pro-death, pro-abortion, pro-baby killing camp. So it's not only incumbent on Biden to abstain from receiving Holy Communion, but on bishops, his ordinary, which is Wilton Gregory, who's not going to do anything, or the boss of the bishops, who is the Bishop of Rome, to make it clear that he ought not to be receiving Holy Eucharist. Now, this comes through Canon 915. And we say here on Rules for Retrogrades, enforce Canon 915. Enforce Canon 915. Enforce Canon 915. USCCB, you group of serpents, you're getting together in 2.5 weeks. I don't even know what to tell you because I have such low hopes. But what you ought to be doing, what heaven demands that you do with such powerful American politicians as Pelosi and Biden, now being, 3 of the most powerful Americans, 2 of the 3 most powerful Americans, you must say, okay, 915 needs to be enforced. Now, the USCCB punted on this issue, and I'm going to read Canon 915 to you in just a second. They punted on this issue when they met in Denver about 20 years ago. And none other than Cardinal Burke, the likes of Bright Light Cardinal Burke, wrote an excellent piece that I'd like to read large swaths of for you now. It goes like this, and no shocker, he wrote it and published it late yesterday. It's called Catholic Politicians and Non-Admittance to Holy Communion. Praise be Jesus Christ. Dear brothers and sisters in Christ, for the past several months, the intention of the church in the United States of America has been very much in my prayers. At their coming November meeting, the bishops of the United States will be considering the application of Canon 915 of the Code of Canon Law. We know so because over 6 months ago, they drafted a little document that said that they would deal with Canon 915 vis-a-vis abortion and American Catholic politicians at this November meeting in late 2021. Here's what Canon 915 says, as quoted by Burke. Those who have been excommunicated or interdicted after the imposition or declaration of the penalty, and others obstinately persevering in manifest grave sin, are not to be admitted to Holy Communion. End quote. End Canon 915. Burke continues, their deliberations will address, in particular, the long-term and gravely scandalous situation of Catholic politicians who persist in supporting and advancing programs, policies, and laws in grievous violation of the most fundamental precepts of the moral law, while at the same time claiming to be devout Catholics. Sound familiar yet? It should. Especially by presenting themselves to receive Holy Communion. In praying for the bishops in my homeland, the United States of America, I have more and more, Burke says, thought about the experience of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops over 17 years ago, nearly 20 years ago, at their summer meeting in Denver in June 2004, in addressing the same issues. It is an experience which I lived intensely. A punting on this issue, a punting that ought to have been a clear articulation by the sovereigns and the princes of the church, of the American church, that said, Catholic politicians, the only ones we really have any spiritual jurisdiction over, you ought to understand you live in the shadow of a volcano if you're pro-abortion. You ought to understand that you live in the glowering, gloomy shadow of Vesuvius, which is ready to spit hellfire on you if you enact pro-abortion legislation, and many of you do. I'll return to Cardinal Burke in a second. I just wanted to wax a little poetic there. Burke says, I have thought it important to offer the following reflections as a help to us all in addressing now and in the future such a critical matter, a matter of life and death for the unborn and of eternal salvation for the Catholic politicians involved. In my homeland, as in other nations, I had wanted to offer these reflections much sooner, but recovery from recent health difficulties prevented the writing of these reflections until now. Also bear in mind, dear parish orphan, dear retrograde, the timing. I mean, that's fine. That's better late than never. He's saying he got sick with COVID, which is true. We all buy it. But guess what? Isn't it interesting that the goodly Cardinal Burke published this less than 24 hours before the meeting of Biden and Pope Francis, who will certainly be discussing the USCCB meeting, which, like the sword of Damocles, assuming that it's sharp, the USCCB could actually dispose ill the fate of Biden, who says he's a Catholic. No, it's not a coincidence. He continues, the context of June 2004 meeting was, regarding the USCCB, was the campaign of Senator John Kerry for President of the United States. Senator Kerry claimed to be a Catholic while at the same time supporting and promoting abortion on demand in the nation. At the time, I was Archbishop of St. Louis. As had been my practice as Bishop of La Crosse, I admonished Senator Kerry not to present himself to receive Holy Communion because, after having been duly admonished, he persisted in the objectively grave sin of promoting directly procured abortion. I was not the only bishop to admonish him thus. From the time of my first episcopal ministry in the Diocese of La Crosse, I had confronted the situation of politicians presenting themselves as practicing Catholics and, at the same time, supporting and advancing programs, policies, and laws in violation of the moral law. I reminded Eagle Eye Ed Martin and RT News today when I made this appearance that this is not relevant only to Catholics. This is the moral law, the natural moral law, relevant for all people. Not all of the Catholic precepts are precepts of natural law. right? They don't reach everyone equally, but this is a violation of natural law, abortion. As a new and relatively young bishop, I spoke with brother bishops, especially one of the senior suffragans in my ecclesiastical province, about several Catholic lawmakers in the Diocese of La Crosse who were in this situation. The common response of brother bishops was the expectation that the Conference of Bishops would eventually address the question. Knowing my moral obligation in a matter of such serious consequences, defined in Canon 915, I began to contact the legislators from the Diocese of La Crosse, asking to meet with them. I mean, what a goodly and pastoral pastor. I mean, encounter, dialogue, meeting these wayward, sickly, sin-stained leaders where they're at. Anything that Francis, any imagery or iconography that Francis has turned up in reference to the people who are supposedly morally disaffected, and any imagery which impels us to go meet them where they're at, man, Cardinal Burke put this into action with regard to the sinful, hellfire and brimstone threatened legislators that he had in his jurisdiction. He asked to meet with them to discuss the complete incoherence of their position regarding procured abortion with the Catholic faith they professed. Sadly, none of them was willing to meet with me. One carried out a certain correspondence with me, insisting that his position regarding abortion was consistent with the Catholic faith, following the erroneous counsel presented by certain dissident professors of moral theology, adherents of the heretical school of proportionalism, at a summit held at the Hattiesburg compound of the Kennedy family in the summer of '64, which is a whole other show, a whole other interesting topic. But I'm going to skip some of that detail. Regarding the refusal of the legislators to meet with me, I must observe that I find at best naive the common refrain that what is needed is more dialogue with the Catholic politicians and legislators in question. This is a shot right across Pope Francis's bow. More dialogue is not needed in this case. I mean, dialogue's always good. I'm not one of these guys that says dialogue's bad. Dialogue's a very, very right-wing thing when you do it properly, the way Cardinal Burke does. He's just saying, look, I've tried it. It doesn't work with these cats. Here's why. In my experience, Burke says, they are not willing to discuss the matter because the teaching of the natural law, which necessarily is also the teaching of the church, is beyond discussion. In some cases, too, I've had the strong impression that they were unwilling to discuss the matter because they were simply unwilling to have their minds and hearts changed. Come on, this is 99% of them, at least. The truth, he says, remains that procured abortion is the knowing and willing destruction of a human life, and anything else is bullshit. Right? I mean, how long have we heard, my entire life, have we heard a 15-year-old, mother who procures an abortion doesn't know it's killing a baby? That is absolute nonsense. How long have we heard the defense, even the Supreme Court used it in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that so many Americans have trusted to the moral imprimatur of the Supreme Court? No one does. Everyone knows the Supreme Court is just legislators in black robes. And everyone understands, by virtue of the fact that they're trying to kill their babies when they go and procure an abortion, that they're ending a human life. This is what you're paying the doctor, the hitman, to do, to end this human life. It's very simple. So let's we're all adults here. We're all adults in the room. Let's get past that. Okay? And Cardinal Burke always does. That's what I love about the man. The truth remains that procured abortion is the knowing and willing destruction of a human life. Come on. I don't care if I knew abortion was wrong when I was 6 years old, and I found out what it was, 6 or 7, and I found out what it was. It's not complex. The thing sought, the desideratum of abortion, it kills this baby, so I don't have to worry about it, is the murder. Therein lies the murder. So question asked, question answered. Do they know that what they're trying to do is kill a baby? They're going to a doctor and saying, hey, I'm looking to kill a baby. And the politicians are looking to accommodate the person who's trying to kill their baby. So Cardinal Burke gets way past it. He continues, when I was Archbishop of St. Louis, One Catholic legislator agreed to meet with me, even though, as his parish priest also attested, he was not presenting himself to receive Holy Communion. He began the meeting by showing me a picture of his family. As I recall, his wife and he had 4 children. As our conversation progressed, I asked him how, having so proudly shown me the picture of his children, he could regularly vote in favor of killing babies in the womb. He immediately lowered his head and said, "It is wrong. I know it is wrong." While I urged him to act in accordance with his conscience, which he had just expressed, I had to admire the fact that at least he admitted the evil in which he was involved and did not try to present himself to me as a devout Catholic. Fair enough. Regarding the objective reality of the practice of abortion as a most grievous violation of the first precept of the natural law, take no life, no innocent life, which safeguards the inviolability of innocent, defenseless human life, there's nothing about which to dialogue. There's nothing to dialogue. What are we talking about? Right? This isn't what's better, Pepsi or RC Cola. It's just an obvious precept. It's a precept. It's preceptual. There's nothing to reason about here. Everyone knows it. The law is written on the heart. Killing is wrong. Killing little babies is especially wrong. It's more wrong than all the other things that the left throws at the history of America. Prints in the history books as mortal sins, if such a thing exists in the mind of the left. The subject of dialogue must be how to best prevent such an evil in society. Such prevention can neither involve the actual promotion of the evil. With the announcement of my transfer from the Diocese of La Crosse to the Archdiocese of St. Louis on December the 2nd, 2003, the secular press traveled to the Diocese of La Crosse in order to find material for the creation of a negative image of the new archbishop before his arrival in the archdiocese. This is what they have been doing to Burke since before they really knew he would rise to the prominence that he now attains in the world church. Whereas before my transfer, there was no public discussion of my pastoral interventions with the lawmakers in question, as is altogether appropriate. The matter now became public in December of 2003 and January of 2004. In putting the question of the application of Canon 915 before the body of bishops at its meeting in June 2004, the pastoral action which I had taken in the Diocese of La Crosse and was beginning to take in the Archdiocese of St. Louis was placed in serious question. To illustrate the fact, during a break in the meeting, I encountered on a stairwell one of the eminent members of the Conference of Bishops who shook his finger at me. I wonder who this is. He declared, "You cannot do what you've been doing without the approval of the Conference of Bishops." To be clear, other bishops were following a similar pastoral action or inaction. I responded to his declaration by pointing out that when I die, I will appear before the Lord to give an account of my service as bishop, not before the Conference of Bishops. Now, ironically, even though they're trying to hide behind this, the serpents and cowards on this USCCB, they have no sovereignty as a juridical body. Individual bishops, the atoms, so to speak, of the USCCB are more sovereign. They have their own sovereignty. They have their own powers running with their sovereignty that the USCCB does not have as a conference of bishops. It's just collegial. Here I must, and he says this, here I must note that the pastoral action taken had nothing to do with interfering in politics. It was directly related to the safeguarding of the sanctity of the Holy Eucharist, to the salvation of the souls of the politicians in question, and to the prevention of the serious scandal caused by them. He's just saying he wasn't being political. The discussion during the meeting in June 2004 was difficult and intense. Without going into the details of the discussion, there seemingly was no consensus among the bishops, even though there was, among some of the most influential bishops, the desire to avoid any intervention with Catholic politicians who, according to the discipline of Canon 915, should not be admitted to receive Holy Communion. Ultimately, the president, then Bishop Wilton Gregory of the Diocese of Belleville, that name jumped out at me. I did not know he was that powerful, that far away, that long, 17 years ago. He remanded the matter to a task force on Catholic bishops and Catholic politicians under the chairmanship of then Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. I need like a reverb on my voice for these names that pop up 17 years ago. Who was clearly opposed to the application of 915 in the case of Catholic politicians supporting procured abortion and other practices which gravely and publicly violate the moral law. The task force was comprised of a group of bishops with mixed views on the subject. In any case, with time, the task force was forgotten, and the critical issue was left unaddressed by the Conference of Bishops. When Bishop Gregory announced the task force, the bishop sitting next to me observed that we could now be certain the issue would not be addressed. That's what task forces do. Camel's a horse made by committee. When they punt like this, when they say we're going to discuss it, which is probably what's going to happen in 2.5 weeks in Baltimore, it means they're not going to do diddly squat. In the context of recalling the Denver meeting of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops in June of 2004, it is important to me to recount 2 other related personal experiences. Now, his 2 experiences are good, and I admonish you to read the rest of this article. But basically what Cardinal Burke is saying here is that it's a couple things related to the 2004 prefect for the CDF, Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger letter on the lyceity of presenting oneself for Holy Communion when a voter or a citizen or a legislator is not in mental conformity with the Pope on all issues. He says very clearly in that letter, which I urge you all to go read, 2004 CDF letter on worthiness to present oneself for Holy Communion, that you can disagree about the prudential application of war. You can disagree with the Holy Father about the prudential application of the death penalty. You can be yay or nay in regard to any war or any individual case of the death penalty. But with regard to abortion and euthanasia, one cannot support a pro-abortion politician for that reason. Okay? And so Cardinal Burke goes on to relate that he had a meeting with Cardinal Ratzinger, and Ratzinger was surprised that his letter had not been read publicly by the USCCB. It sounds like it had been tabled. He concludes 17 years have passed since the meeting of the USCCB in Denver during the month of June of 2004. The most serious question of the application of 915 of the Code of Canon Law to Catholic politicians who support and promote programs, policies, and legislation in grievous violation of the natural law seemingly remains a question for the Conference of Bishops. In fact, the obligation of the individual bishop, this is what I was saying before about the atom being more powerful and sovereign than the compound, is a matter of universal church discipline. The obligation of individual bishops is a matter of universal church discipline. The obligation of individual bishops is a matter of universal church discipline regarding faith or morals, over which the Conference of Bishops has zero authority. In fact, a number of bishops have understood their sacred duty in the matter and are taking appropriate action. A Conference of Bishops fulfills an important role of support for the diocesan bishop, but it cannot replace the authority that belongs properly to him. It is the diocesan bishop, not the conference, that applies the universal law to particular situation. This is important, parish orphans and retrogrades, for this reason. I have been talking a lot ever since July the 16th, 2021, about Traditionis Custodes. There are certain acts of rebellion that are ultra vires to, let's just say it, a right-wing Catholic bishop or archbishop. There are other acts of defiance or going rogue, lighting out on one's own as a bishop among the other bishops that are not ultra vires. He's setting up here. This is probably what the meeting between Biden and Francis concerns to large effect. Individual, let's say it, bishops with cojones in the USCCB, like Strickland, right? Like Burke, there are some progeny, intellectual progeny of Burke and Strickland. They remain the sovereigns. So when the USCCB, I'm hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst, when they punt on this issue for the first time in 17 years, the issue of pro-abortion politicians and taking away communion from them, which Canon 915 really requires, if you follow the thought through to its conclusion, then it still remains to be done by the individual sovereign bishops. This is not like ultra vires, unilateral, monolithic action here by individual bishops over their flock remains their own. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is collegial. It has no real magisterial powers. Okay? So this is one of those instances where I am telling you very clearly the magisterium, everything written about conferences of bishops says, look, they're collegial. They're just there to help. They're a gathering party, right? They're a party of deliberative encounter, but they are not binding. And individual bishops could and should apply Canon 915 against pro-abortion legislators and pro-abortion executives and pro-abortion federal justices and judges as they see fit, and I hope they see fit in a trigger-happy way. 915 needs to be applied. Everyone say it with me. Canon 915 must be applied. This is what the church is here to do. The globalists have power in our country and in countries around the world, and they seem to have united. But the church is here to take them down a peg, to admonish the sinner for the sake of the sinners themselves, but also for the little baby, most importantly for the little babies. And thirdly, in a tertiary way, but an important tertiary way, to remind the Christians that while we do not yet hold power, real political power, we still do have influence. And to the extent that Biden cares somewhat about being Catholic, I don't know that he does at all. He can't give much of a damn, right? He's pro-abortion. I mean, he knows where he's going. But, I mean, he knows enough to know that. But he pretends to. So that is influence. It's not power. By the way, Canon 447 of the Code of Canon Law backs up what Burke is saying here about the individual bishops. The atoms are more powerful magisterially than the compounds that they comprise in the Conference of Bishops. 447 reads, a conference of bishops, a permanent institution, is a group of bishops of some nation or certain territory who jointly exercise certain functions for the Christian faithful of their territory in order to promote the greater good which the church offers to humanity, especially through forms and programs of the apostolate, fittingly adapted to the circumstances of time and place according to the norm of law. Parish orphans and retrogrades, God bless you. Keep your eyes on this. There will be facts leaking out about it over the next couple of days. They will be finely culled and curated. They will be culled and curated in order to weaponize whatever information there is and to weaponize the tribalism. Pope Francis meets with his friends. There will be a picture of them laughing released just like Pelosi. There will be information slowly released over the next 2 weeks that will be relevant to Biden himself and to the USCCB meeting in Baltimore. There are a couple other issues, but they're not as interesting, so we're not going to get to them. But remember, the medium is the message. These guys are two of the four most powerful men on earth. They met and they showed that they didn't have to show. They showed that they didn't have to show what they're meeting about. Keep your head on a swivel. Let's watch this thing closely. And let's pray for the best in Baltimore, but prepare for the worst. Deus Volt. We're going to end abortion yet. Deus Volt.